Welcome to Sober Dad Crew, the podcast where we talk about all things sobriety, recovery, parenting, music, tattoos, work, and more. For more information, please visit soberdadcrew.com. My guest this episode is Mark Miller. He's a straight edge dad, photographer, co-host of the Nickel City Soundtrack podcast, and the singer in the band Holdout. Mark, welcome to Sober Dad Crew.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always like to start by asking how many kids you have.
I have two. I have a boy and a girl.
And what's the age bracket dynamic?
13 and 10. So the girl is 13 and the boy is 10.
Yeah, I've got 8, 12, 17, and 21. So the younger two are technically my stepkids.
Yeah.
But they're my kids, you know. There's no difference. And so as I like to joke, I signed up for another deployment or another Call of Duty.
There you go.
But I love it. You know, like what else am I going to do
I hear
with
you.
my time?
Podcast.
Yeah. Well, and I guess and my day job, right? There's always that, the thing that actually makes money and doesn't cost me money, which the podcast does. But
yeah.
And you probably know a little bit about that, and we'll get to that. But the other question I like to ask is, did you always want to be a dad?
No. It kind of happened.
It's why I like to ask the question.
I didn't think I would be a dad. I guess it could have happened. I wasn't against it, but I guess I didn't foresee it. And then it just happened one day. So
these things do happen. It's not magic, but.
Yeah, I was dating someone at the time, and I don't know, she got pregnant and there was a miscarriage, and then she got immediately pregnant again. So that's where the first kid came along, and then I guess you got to have two or something, right?
Or more. Why stop? Yeah. Well,
well, she always would say well, you got to have two because someone has to have they have to have a partner in life that knows how they came up. And I didn't agree with that, I guess, even though I have a couple of brothers, but I think it's true. I think it's nice to have someone else who understands exactly where you came from, in the world.
And it's been said, and I think it's true. It is generally speaking the longest relationship that you will have in your life is with your siblings.
Yes, definitely.
So don't stay pissed, I guess, when they do shit like that brothers and sisters do.
Yeah, I agree. I live very far away from mine, so I know my brothers have had issues and stuff, but I live so far away from everyone that I've never experienced the issues that everyone has with each other. So it's good.
Yeah,
but everyone's cool now.
Yeah, my brother's in Berkeley, and we're both in New York. So you and you're further west.
Where are you actually?
I live in Aurora. Do you know where that is? It's in the Finger Lakes. Do you know Ithaca?
Yeah.
And obviously Syracuse. So it's kind of not a straight line between the two, but it's sort of a midway on the horizon or latitudinally. That's the word I want.
I've been to Ithaca forever. A long time. I used to go to shows in Ithaca back in the 90s, but I haven't been there in a long time. So.
Yeah, you probably went to the Haunt.
Never did. The only shows I saw in Ithaca were I think it was at Cornell. There was a place called the Jam Community Room, and they had shows there. So that's where I went to shows in Ithaca. Yeah, I knew about the Haunt, but I never went to the Haunt.
Well, the Haunt is now dead.
Really?
There's the original Haunt. As we nerd out on this, on Green Street in Ithaca, which, famously, Nirvana played in before anyone knew who they were, and Pearl Jam played in before anyone knew who they were.
Wow.
It was a tiny little place. Yeah. It's now a restaurant. It has sort of varying incarnations over the years. It was a calzone place for years, but it moved across town and then was purchased during COVID and is now becoming a housing development.
Interesting.
Yeah, so there is no more haunt. I guess the local promoter bought the name, so there's whispers that the haunt will come back, but it's kind of hard to like. It'd be like going, oh, CBGBs. Now we're just gonna like move you somewhere else and like draw on the walls and make it like it was the place. You can't go back.
I agree. Time and a place.
Time and a place, and and I think about that. I grew up in Portland, Maine, and there was all those places that are still there and the ones that aren't, and that just kind of is what it is.
You know what's funny? I'm going to Portland, Maine in a couple of weeks. I've never been to Maine, and no, I've never been there.
Portland, Maine's an awesome city.
Yeah.
If you like donuts, the Holy Donut is incredible.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Me and some photographer friends of mine are going on a little bit of a road trip. We're gonna shoot some lighthouses and do that type of stuff. So.
Oh, fun. Yeah. I mean, my folks are still there, so we're back a couple times a year at least, usually winter and summer. So
yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, piece of my heart lives there for sure.
Yeah, very cool. I'm hoping to get to New Hampshire as well.
Well, you got to at least drive through it.
Yeah.
Because Maine is the only state that has one state as its border. And that is the state of New Hampshire. Yeah. So, I mean, you at least have to pass through it.
Yeah.
But depending if you go up through the south, it's a pretty short little jaunt through New Hampshire.
Exciting. I'm so excited now.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. I love Portland. It is just an awesome city.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah. So let's dive a little bit into the sort of sobriety thing.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times on this podcast, I'm sort of talking to folks in recovery, but I like to cover sort of the spectrum, and chosen sobriety is kind of one of those things.
Yeah.
And you are straight edge, which
I am
by its nature is chosen sobriety. Can you kind of like dive into that a little bit and talk about that journey and like what brought you there?
Okay. Well, I don't know how much of a journey it is. It's kind of something I've pretty much always been. Like, there was times when I was a kid and I took a sip of my dad's beer and stuff like that, but like that's pretty much as far as it got. But when I was in college, I came up to Buffalo to go to school because I grew up in New York City. I came to college in Buffalo, and I was, kind of like, doing my thing in college, and I eventually started going to hardcore shows when I came to Buffalo. I went to some in New York, but mostly, like most of the shows I've been to have been in Buffalo, and I was into like different kinds of things. Like growing up, I was into like rap and like industrial music and stuff like that. I always liked independent, like alternative music, but then I found hardcore, and I was like, this is cool. I like the whole like DIY aspect of everything. And then I discovered that, there was straight edge kids and stuff. And I was like, that's what I am. But I think a lot of this stuff is stupid. Like, cause I grew up, I went to college, I was on campus, and there was like every Friday night, packs of kids going down Main Street to the bars and stuff. And I thought that was like the dumbest thing ever. So I didn't do it. And I've, kind of been that way, forever. Well, since, I guess I made the declaration back in like 1992 or 1993, but yeah, I've been this way for a long ass time. So it's what I do. It's my thing.
And that's, it is interesting sort of being of the age of, I was in high school in the 80s, and,
yes,
my road sort of into punk was finding the Clash. And then there was this in Portland, this place Zoots, and it was a dance club, but guess Wednesday nights, was all ages. And,
Yeah.
So then it was sort of The Cure in that avenue, but it was sort of all that sort of alternative stuff. I never felt like I fit into the mainstream. I really don't think I still do. I don't really feel like I fit in the mainstream. Mortgages and kids and all that force you, into certain elements of the mainstream, because you got to eat, and kids want stuff.
They do.
And you need to have a car and all those things. But I still feel, in a lot of ways, like outside of that thread. And I think a lot of that is that sort of punk DIY underpinning. I it's in my DNA. I think I can't really like get it out.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I'm at an advanced age as well. So I graduated high school in 1991, and like I still go to shows and stuff. Maybe not as many as I used to, but as many as I probably should at my age. I go a couple times a month to a show, and there's younger kids and stuff. And I know a lot of the younger kids because I take pictures at shows, so that's kind of how I kind of stay involved at shows and kind of like lend my talents to the scene even today. There's a lot of other photographers in the scene, but it's cool to just be there, take pictures, stuff like that. I have a band and stuff, so I still kind of do that. And I mean, I agree. I too have never felt like I was part of the mainstream. In music, life, politics.
Yeah, I find it, I think, impossible not to touch on politics on my podcast.
Yeah.
In a lot of reasons, because I think chosen sobriety is a political act.
Definitely.
Or getting sober is a political act. I think in America, where you have a history of the government flooding, Black communities with drugs and things like that, choosing like not to literally take the opioid of the masses is a political act. And, this week in particular, among many other weeks, I feel like that choice is important because I'm clear of mind as I try and think through, the way ahead.
Definitely. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I guess I don't take things as hard as a lot of other people, but I'm not a woman. So I feel like they've been hit hard because with this election, I feel like there's all these things in the election, like all these like different like subjects and and stances and stuff. But like the one thing that like can literally be changed is like, women's right to choose and stuff. Like inflation comes and goes, the world affects all that, but like this right to, control your body is something I think should have been more important for everyone to kind of like, to vote on, because everything else is, a bunch of people got to agree, like, and over time it changes, but if you can codify the right to choose, it'd be great for everybody, I think. But that's my opinion. It's not for everyone, as I told someone earlier today.
I'm with you on that opinion. A crazy piece of statistics that's come out of the voting is a fairly significant number of folks who voted to protect the right to choose in their state where those ballot measures were also voted for Donald Trump.
That's absurd.
Absurd. And wholly inconsistent.
I guess voters aren't the smartest people in the world, but I'm not going to judge anybody.
Yeah, it's complicated because I feel like this time, who you're voting for. Like we kind of last time, you're like, no, people are just really not convinced that this guy's a racist rapist, but now they kind of know. And I feel like America's just saying like, hey, this is what we are. Right.
I agree.
Like, the deportation of immigrants we're talking about goes back to Chinese Exclusion Act, all this stuff. I mean, it is the thread, and white supremacy is the thread of American history. So we're just like in it again.
Yeah. I was seeing some of the exit polls too, and people were saying democracy was high on their list of priorities, yet Trump won. What?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is mind-boggling. And, and talking to my 21-year-old, he's like, he's of the age of activism. Like you and
Yes.
I, like we have a role, but we're old now,
Yeah.
So
Yes, we are.
talking to him, like what it means to organize, right?
Yeah.
Like hitting the streets is important, but actually like learning how to organize and like motivate people is a skill, because
Yes.
that's what we got right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, hopefully, I don't know how the House went. Did it go to Republicans?
The last I heard was it was leaning that way, which is really bad because that was the last sort of piece of defense that was there. Other than Trump's kind of lazy. I mean, that's sort of like.
Well, he seems motivated to get rid of the illegal immigrants. So we'll see what happens.
Well, and I'm worried about him in protest. Like he wants to just let loose. So
yeah,
I also believe that the universe does bend towards justice. I do believe that, and I do believe in the Constitution, and I believe in the ebb and flow of history. And so we're not going back. We're just in a rough spot.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because me and my kids, we went on a field trip yesterday to the Theodore Roosevelt inaugural site, if you know what that is. So McKinley was shot and killed in Buffalo, and Roosevelt became the president here in Buffalo, New York. And so we went and saw the whole story of him becoming the president and how like they had texts that he said and stuff, and how it's so different now, like the statesmanship and stuff and all that stuff, and compared to like Trump now and how he's just an angry man who feels like he's been wrong when he has everything in the world. But be that as it may.
Yeah. I mean, so my last piece on a woman's right to choose is, gentlemen, if you're done having kids, get a vasectomy.
Yes,
that is my mantra now, is like that is one thing you can do if you have the number of children that you are happy with your partner. There is something you can do that will protect women or help, definitely. and it is that.
Agreed. But we'll see how this goes. Hopefully, in a couple of years, if they get the House, it'll flip because the party in power always kind of loses the House.
Yeah.
So hopefully that happens. We'll see.
Yeah. So let's pivot a little bit to more pleasant topics.
Of course.
Let's talk about your podcast a little bit. So I did not realize that Buffalo is known as the Nickel City until digging into that. So that's kind of a cool story. But then, if you can sort of talk about how your podcast started and what it's about.
Okay. Well, COVID hit, in 2020, and Chris, who I mainly do a podcast with, there's a couple of other people who were involved. Chris sent me a mess. I used to have a podcast called the HMNI Fanzine Podcast. I used to do a podcast of a fanzine called Hello, My Name Is, and it was called HMNI. And I had a podcast for a few years where I interviewed people and did that. And I kind of didn't take it too seriously. I kind of did it, and I would interview people, and then I would cut 5 episodes at a time, to get them out, because I hated to edit and stuff. But Chris came up with an idea. He was like, "Let's do a podcast." You've kind of done a podcast, you kind of know how to do it. And Chris is even older than I am. No kids though, but he is going to have a stepson soon. But anyway, he was like, "Let's do a podcast." We used to live together back in the 90s as well. So he's like, "Let's do a podcast." So he came up with the idea. We were going to interview specific Buffalo, hardcore, people about specific, releases and stuff. And we're just going to talk about that. But it's kind of morphed into us just kind of interviewing people and talking to them about, just their them being in the scene in general and finding hardcore and underground music in general and stuff like that. Sometimes we have sometimes we talk about specific things, but it's pretty broad now. We just kind of talk about people and what they're doing and all that stuff. Sometimes we have discussions like me, Chris, and the other two guys who were part of the podcast. We have like core talks where we kind of talk about different subjects and stuff. So we do that. And all four people who are involved with the podcast are straight edge for whatever take that as you will.
And are still straight edge.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Chris is a little older than I am. Derek, who's the editor, I think he's 5 years younger than I am, and Alex is like 40-ish. So
yeah, baby.
We're all still straight edge. So it wasn't like a rule or anything, but it just kind of happened that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool because a lot of people, I mean, and I was listening to the Black Flag episode today, you know, and you guys were talking about the song My War.
Yeah.
You know, and back when you're kids, you're like, I'm against all them. And then one of them, you guys said, oh, now some of the other are my friends from the scene.
Yes.
Right. So it's, you know, how do you hold on to that, you know, the ethos and the DIY and the political standpoint in the reality of, well, just capitalism, but the day-to-day, like we were saying earlier, you got a mortgage, you got a job, you got to do the thing.
I mean, I think it's just how I've been. And I know people get older and they kind of change and morph, but I feel like ideals are your ideals, like whether you're 18 or 50, like you believe certain things are right. Like I never understood how that changed over time, but I did change, so I don't really understand how you change. You know, as some friend of mine famously said, I'm a dude who doesn't change. I'm just the same. I mean, I evolve on things. You know, I take things in, you know, check them out, and I decide how I want to, you know, where I want to stand on things. But I've been fairly the same, you know, the whole time. I think as an adult, so it's what it is. It's how I've done it, I guess.
Yeah, so. It's interesting because when I'll talk to my wife about stuff, I'm sort of like, we got to burn it down. And she's like, no, I don't think that's quite, you know, when it's like middle school drama. I'm like, you got to like rebel. I bought my 12-year-old a woman in the pit shirt.
Nice.
You know, because like that girl drama, it's just, you know, her sister is 17. It's this COVID thing. Like her middle school, she was at home. So like I missed out like on some of that dynamic. And now she's a senior in high school, but her older brother was kind of home as he graduated. So it's interesting to see. I'm like, it's like another pass through some of these things, but also seeing some of those impacts of, oh, right, my son who's 21 should have been doing what my 17-year-old is doing now, which is like being out, not being at home, like doing the thing. And he was just stuck at home with me and his sister. Like, we're all right, but like, it's not what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like in a few years, like that stuff's like all these kids who like graduated at home they're gonna have like a commonality that I guess they're gonna kind of share, you know, as life goes on.
Yeah. I mean, it is going to be that, you know, where were you when kind of, you know, whatever, I guess that's 9/11 for us in some ways, is maybe the biggest.
I remember that day vividly.
I do.
Yeah.
Well, were you, you would have been in Buffalo then.
Yeah, I was in Buffalo. How old was I? So I was 27, I guess. And I remember I was supposed to go to work I did go to work that day. And I remember like my roommate at the time, he was watching the news and stuff. And like, I still went to work because I like, you know,
we didn't know
what I did. Yeah. And I tried to call New York because my dad and brothers lived in New York and you couldn't get through. Like, it was just like, when everything was like messed up and you can get through. What the funny thing is about that day that I really remember about that day, um, we were there, we were open till 9, and like we didn't do a bunch of stuff. I remember my boss wrote a memo about how we needed to get all this stuff done that we didn't get done on September 11th. That's like we weren't preoccupied with nothing else that day, but he wrote a memo to us about how we didn't get shit done.
So if you look up dick move in the dictionary, that like might be one of the ones there. I mean, I remember like going to work, and I worked in this really small publishing company. It was like the owner and like two of us, and I was the marketing guy.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was, it was early-ish internet, I guess, which is funny to say, but we always go in, and I got there and he was like, he had checked like CNN, and he was like, holy cow, like this plane, crashed into the building, which had happened, right? Like those things that happened before were like, oh, like that fucked up and terrible and all that. And then you're like, oh, motherfucker, another one, right?
Yeah.
And we were kind of there. And I think we stayed until and we were just watching, and I think the towers fell. And
I remember watching that like live.
Yeah, and we went home, and we're just like, well, there's nothing like to do today. And at the time, with my first wife, it was before our kids were born. We had foster kids, and trying to explain that shit to a kid, and then thank God for Nickelodeon, which just played like SpongeBob and shit. So, because you're trying, like, they were like 5 and 6 years old or something at that point. And it just was impossible to explain any of that to them. So
one thing I remember about that day too, like I remember watching TV, and like the news thing was like 10,000 dead and all this stuff on the TV. And it was like, was it just over a couple thousand people died in the towers, but it was like 10,000 dead. It was like the world was ending that day. It was just like crazy. But I remember
I was amazed that, and not to diminish those who died, but I thought I thought so many more people were like, that was kind of miraculous.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many people like were able to get out. Yeah.
Yeah. And, and I had people in New York at that time, and my brother was always flying. Like he had a high travel job. Well, like, it was that thing. You're like trying to get a hold of people, and like,
yes. Yeah, it was very tough. And I remember one of the guys who I worked with, like I work in a camera store, and he had pulled this like small TV out of the back and was like just glued to it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to even be watching this. I kind of like, this is such a thing. He was just like glued to the TV. I was like, maybe go home and watch it or something. But this, just like, it was like bothering me because I couldn't get a hold of anyone in New York. It was just like, it was a very like, I didn't want to see anything going on there. Who knew what was coming next,
Well, right. Yeah. So. And we didn't know. And, all the airlines were grounded, all those things. And then what did come next was a war.
Yes.
And I was, at least, and you also were, old enough to probably not be the first round if a draft had come. But I remember, in the first Gulf War, I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, what's going to happen if they start to draft again? I'm like,
yeah,
I don't want to be a part of that situation.
I agree with you.
I do not want to be drafted.
Luckily, we've aged out of that. But our kids,
God, it would be a bad situation if they drafted us now. Oh my God, it would be like super desperate. Bring out the old dudes. Just like, I'm like,
how does this work?
My knees are not that great anymore, so I don't know like what you would use me for, but
yeah, I hear that.
I'm a pretty good cook. I could cook. Maybe they.
There you go.
That, but
there you go. Very cool.
Well, we digress away from your podcast a little bit, but I'm impressed. Like, you have like over 200 episodes. I just hit. Will be episode 51. So you like have done a lot of episodes.
So how do you edit your own episodes?
I do.
So Derek, one of the guys, shout out Derek. like we did the podcast, me and Chris, and like the first few episodes, like I was editing them, or we had this one guy editing them, then he couldn't do it anymore. So it was me doing it. It was like they were like coming out like every few weeks because I don't have any time for anything. But Derek, he's a friend of ours. He's like, let me check it out. I could like maybe edit that for you. And he's just been doing it ever since. And we've had like straight episodes for like, I think 3 years or so. Like since January of like 21, I think, or 22 or something. Every week they've come out. So because of Derek. So.
Yeah, that's good. As I said before, I hit record. My wife and the younger two, my 12-year-old, she's at a soccer tournament in Florida, and her 8-year-old brother went too. So I've been trying to like jam in a bunch of recording this weekend, amongst other stuff. We're having an addition put on our house, so it's like,
oh, cool,
emptying our closet of clothing out and all this sort of stuff. We're getting ready to go into the chaos phase of that when they break through into the house. I'm like, oh my God. Here we go. But it's good. I mean, we're excited about it, but it's a little bit of chaos.
Yeah. That's cool though. I mean, speaking of stuff like that, like, so we had a fire in the house. I don't live with my kids. They live with their mom. And we have a 2-family house that we own in Buffalo. And like March 18th or something, there was a fire. Our tenant was moving out and there was a fire in the apartment. And so we couldn't rent the apartment anymore. And it's still not fixed, like 4 years later, because we've had all sorts of issues with contractors and nobody wants to work with insurance companies and stuff. And hopefully this winter it'll be done, but it's just crazy that all these things are happening.
And it's a small project. So I do marketing for an architecture firm. And we do like hospitals and affordable housing, and built the Dalai Lama's headquarters in the Western Hemisphere, which is kind of a cool outlier project. That'll never come around again. Yes. But it's like we have trouble finding people for big jobs, and so for my house, we ended up finding a guy. He's doing the shell. Like I'm going to do the electric with my father-in-law, and like that was the way to go. But for like little projects, like people are busy. They look at a little thing like that.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm going to take that giant job.
Yes. Yeah. Our contractor, like with the insurance money, like it doesn't come, like you have to like request it from the bank and stuff. It's a bunch of nonsense, but he can't like wait for us to have him come work. He's got to do his other jobs. And like, so he pretty much does our stuff when he can, basically. So it's tough. Like I wouldn't recommend having a fire in your house and having insurance fix it. So
yeah, well, or just even having having a fire is pretty.
Yeah,
I'm the guy that I like smoke detector in every room. I'm that guy. Yeah. I'm like, a house cannot have enough smoke detectors.
Yeah,
in my mind.
Yeah, we were lucky because there was the fire happened while the tenants were out. No one was home, but I think my ex got home and saw what was happening, called the fire department, or someone called the fire department. They had to like someone must have called the fire department because they had to break down the front door to get into the apartment. But there wasn't that much damage. Like this wall was messed up, but once there's a fire inside of an apartment, the whole thing has got to be like kind of redone.
Yeah, and you got to check all the structure and all that stuff to make sure it's safe.
Yeah, definitely. So it's been an adventure. Hopefully it'll be over soon and be getting that money back in.
Yeah. So can we talk about co-parenting?
Yes, definitely.
So like I got married. We met in COVID, so I got remarried, and so like step parenting's a thing.
Yeah.
But the whole co-parenting thing is an interesting. We like to say we were better at this apart than we were together. But it takes real like effort and stuff to co-parent well and make the kids feel supported. So how's that going?
Good. It was a little rough in the beginning. Like I made all sorts of mistakes with the kids and stuff, like not like giving them stuff that I was supposed to give them, and just a big mess. But we eventually like kind of smoothed it out, and it's going pretty smoothly now. I've calmed down from like, she would like say I did something wrong and I get pissed off about it. But now I'm like, well, okay, let me fix that and do it better going forward rather than getting pissed off about like everything, like, we're still together and fighting and stuff. So it's good. Like I see my kids every weekend, so they come over Friday, Saturday, and I take them home on Sunday. So it's been good though. Like we work pretty good together. If someone needs like a break or cover something, we do that. And I think it's been pretty good for the last little while. So it's good.
Yeah, we always talked about, the kids first was the filter,
Yes.
like, because you got to let go of the shit and the anger and the hurt. Like at a certain point, I was like, I don't want to carry this with me anymore. I just want to like let it go. And the kids don't need me to carry that. They need me to be their dad. But, now it's been so long. Like, I mean, my ex-wife was at my wedding,
Oh, yeah?
and, we all do Thanksgiving together, just giant
very cool.
thing. We kind of always did that. And it's especially my 21-year-old, he's like Mr. Family guy. He's the one, he really likes that thread and it's important. So we still do it. And so you had to figure out pretty quick how to just, not just make it work, but actually like get along. But it's been so long that, it's kind of second nature, and it does change a little bit as the kids get older. It shifts a little bit.
So have you seen other parents who, that are divorced or breaking up that are having a lot of trouble co-parenting?
I mean, I've heard a mix. I mean,
I
feel kind of depends on like what parental involvement is. I mean, I have, friends whose kids don't want to see one of the parents, and that gets to be some complicated business.
Yes, I can imagine.
Like emotionally, legally, financially, all the things. So I think, But I grew up in a family where, and this was a long time ago, my great aunt Babby was not a blood relative.
Yeah.
She had been married to my grandfather's brother, who was not a lot of people's favorite person, because you can say that. So we never saw him really, but we saw her, and she was just family, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of grew up with that model of like, and I, and I believe it, that, family, yes, there's a genetic thread of family, but family also is what you choose and what you make. And I also feel that way about like being called dad. That's like an earned title in my mind. It's not an automatic given. I mean, a lot of times it is, but I think a lot of people just assume it. But I feel like you actually need to work and maintain the right to have that title.
Agreed. It's kind of funny though, because my parents are from a different country, and I don't know if that's how the country is, but they're from Guyana in South America, and I always called my parents by their first name, like since I was a kid. I never called my dad like ever. He was always by his first name. But my kids, they call me dad, or father, or whatever they want to call me.
Or father. Is it father when they're pissed?
Sometimes they say father just like to say it. I think it's like a thing kids are doing nowadays. I don't know. But they don't really get pissed, though. They're fairly well-adjusted kids. They don't require too much, stuff, which is good. They're pretty good.
We always talk about, just like we will talk about anything, in our house. Like, you want to know, we're gonna talk about it.
Nice.
But we always talk about, putting up. Our job is to have like guardrails up.
Yeah.
Like my job, and it morphs right as they get older or whatever. But one of the big jobs as a parent is to keep your kid from flying off the road.
Yeah.
Like you can get like, you're going to cross the lane. You're going to like hit some bumps and have hills and all that stuff. And that's okay. But like, I got to keep you from just like Thelma and Louising it off the edge, and as they get older, those guardrails kind of get lower or whatever. but you got to give them the room to kind of navigate within that, or they're not going to have any life skills.
Definitely. Agreed. No doubt. I've had very few like real conversations with my daughter. She's 13. I've had a couple, about things that I'm like things that like we didn't really. I don't know if I want to express what those things are, but we've had talks about things that like why she can't do certain things, and it's been good. She's been fairly like understanding, and I think she appreciates me like approaching her with stuff like that, or thinking that she's old enough to have a serious conversation with, which I think is good.
Yeah,
my son he's 10. We go to wrestling. He's not there yet. So
yeah. I have an 8-year-old, but they they get there. But I also feel like I think I've always treated kids pretty maturely and respectful of who they are as a person, and want to engage them in like the world and what's going on in ways that are appropriate. I mean, I remember with my oldest, there's one of the innumerable school shootings. It might have been Sandy Hook. And he just really wanted to understand. And I said, like, dude, we got to wait till your younger sister's asleep. We will talk about this, but the conversation we have to have, I can't loop her into at her age, so and I think he respected that, but it is, it's an interesting challenge. Have you seen the movie, the Other F Word? Do you know that movie?
I do not.
It's a documentary, mainly about the singer from Pennywise.
Okay.
And so the F word in question is fatherhood. So it's about a bunch of punk guys, the guys from Rancid and stuff. So all of a sudden you're this punk, and F this, no rules, all that, and then all of a sudden you're a dad.
Yeah.
And how do you find that road through, oh wait, now I have to like have rules and stuff for my kids. It's great. I think it's really great. There's this amazing sort of clip of Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers in there.
Yeah.
Just talking about how like, parents will say, I brought you into this world and I gave you life. And he's like, my kids give me life. And I really that resonated with me. I was like, right, like it is an honor and a privilege to like be called dad by you.
Yeah.
And with my stepkids, it's also right to like have them like allow me and give me the gift of like parenting them is pretty deep stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's one of the coolest things. I mean, it is the coolest thing I've ever done, I guess. But you don't like, I didn't think it would be this way when I was like, before I was a parent. I was like, whatever, people are parents. Like, my dad was a parent. Like, I guess it feels different being a parent to my kids than maybe I ever thought of him being a dad to me. It's like, it's just two different worlds. Like the way, like, we parent and stuff is just like night and day. Like, it's just not the same at all. So.
Yeah, and I mean, there might have been some cultural difference in there too.
Yeah, because I grew up here. He grew up somewhere else, so it's a lot different. The whole coming up thing and stuff. It's funny. I interviewed him just to have it. Like, I talked about like his life growing up, but I never really talked to him about it. And like, it's one of the coolest things. I think everyone should interview their parents if they don't know a whole lot about their parents. Or I think it's one of the greatest things you can do. Like, any questions you have for them, talk to them about it. Like, do an interview because it's very eye opening.
I've been meaning to do that with my dad. My mom is pretty far down the Alzheimer's road now, which is fucking terrible. But like, I keep meaning to like, I just gotta like talk to my dad because he's, he is like a pretty quiet person.
Yeah.
So to like kind of tease out all those things and all those stories. At one point, I got like my parents to write some stories down.
Oh, cool.
Like my kids at one point, they got really into family stories.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I was trying to get, my parents to tell some of their stories about when they were growing up and what that was like, my dad talking about, being a kid in World War II and blackout curtains and all that kind of stuff is like, and some of like just whatever the funny things about, he like talked about painting his car once when he was a teenager and he painted it by hand and the wind came up and blew like sand all over it and it stuck to the paint. I mean, it's just, stuff like that just sort of funny, but also like, oh, this person's a human being too, like they're my grandfather or grandmother, but they're like a person and like with their own, who've made their own mistakes and they had to find their way through the world too.
Yeah. It's very cool. Like my dad, like when I interviewed him, I did like, I guess I never asked because my mom died like, well, when I was a senior in high school, but I never like asked him like how they met. And I did that during the interview. And I never knew this, but like she's a nurse and she was his nurse when he had like some sort of back surgery back in Guyana. But I thought that's how they met and that's how they got together. But no, he re-met her at a dance in America. And that's how they kind of got together, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, I just did a what are you talking about look, because that's sort of bonkers.
Yeah, just crazy.
Like, I don't know. The universe, I think, is a mysterious place.
Yeah.
Like how did I meet my wife in a pandemic? I mean, I know it was Bumble, but I mean, shout out to Bumble. But beyond that, like, how did we worked hard and intentionally and all that, but I was like, how did I meet this fucking incredible human being in the middle of a global pandemic and like manage to build this relationship, and get married? And, it was work and it was intentionality and it was all that, but I don't know. I think there's still mysterious forces in the universe that
I agree.
Steer the ship a little bit. I'm always reluctant to name it.
Yeah.
Because I also think, God it gets used and misused too much for my tastes.
Yeah. It's universal energy. That's what it is. Universal energy.
I had a grandmother, one of my grandmothers, she said, God is love, full stop. I was like, all right, there you go. That is like, all right. No, I can't argue with that.
So I met my current girlfriend pre-pandemic, before the pandemic, and we met on Tinder. But so we were talking on Tinder, and we discovered that we go to the same dentist, and
that's hot.
The first time we met in person, we had an appointment on the exact same day at the dental office.
Did you know that was going to happen?
We did know we were both going to the dentist, but the appointment was like pre-done, like because he has appointments like months out.
Yeah,
so
right.
There was no way for us to make that happen. But we met, like went out to eat, and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah, that's funny. So the dentist is first, at least pre-date.
Yeah.
We just took walks. That's what you could do at first. So we just went out hiking and walking and all that.
Very cool.
And all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I remember the day I walked into that dentist office and she was there. Dude. Like it's like yesterday, but
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Has she met your kids?
Yeah. We've been together for 5 years. So
okay.
I moved into here during the pandemic where we live together. It's her house. But they come over every weekend and stuff. And, hang out and all that good stuff. So it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. She doesn't have any kids. But she has a niece that is kind of like a kid to her. But but she's got good adult parenting skills. So shout out to her.
Step parenting's tricky. It's tricky. Yeah. It's tricky business for sure. Because you're
trying to
build.
But yeah.
build a relationship with people who are kind of fully formed when you meet them.
Yeah, it is crazy.
You know, it's not like this little teeny thing that you're like, oh, all right, we're along for the ride together. You're kind of like all of a sudden you're there.
Yes,
you
pretty
know,
much.
and it takes a lot of work and a lot of patience.
Yeah, definitely. She does have that. So, yeah.
All right, well, let's shift again a little bit and talk
good.
about hardcore and punk a little more, and let's start with your band.
Yeah, I have a band called Holdout. I was in a band called Black X before. We were a straight edge band, made up of a bunch of my friends. Like we just they recorded some stuff for you should sing on this, and I sang on it, but then we broke up. So that's old news. But Holdout, they had a singer and their singer quit, and a friend of a friend said this band's looking for a singer, maybe you should try out. Or I guess it wasn't a tryout. It was just kind of okay, Mark, you sound good. Let's sing for our band. So yeah, we're a band of dads. I think we're all dads. Yeah, three of us, two of us are in our 50s, one's in their 40s, and our guitar player is 32, and he's Canadian.
Oh man!
But he's Canadian, but I think he's a citizen of America now, which is cool.
I mean, keep that other citizenship, man. Don't give up the Canadian.
I think he has both, but he got a girl from America pregnant, and so his daughter lives here, and that's why he's here.
Yeah,
they're not together. He got married to a Canadian last fall, and so he's married to her, but his daughter's here, so that's why he's here in America. So, and he's a guitar player. But yeah, we're a band. We're not as active as we probably should. Well, no, we're as active as we should be, but we don't we have a couple of demos, some more songs in the pipeline. But we have fun doing our thing.
Yeah,
we're called Holdout.
Yeah, I'll link to it.
Yeah,
in the show notes.
Cool.
Can we talk a little bit about coming up black in the punk scene and what that was like for you? Is that a good topic?
That's a great topic, and it's a lot different now than it was then.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, have you read James Spooner's book?
I have not, but I know who James Spooner is. So,
yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, you get it from all sides. I've I was, a lot of people, I get into hardcore and punk, and everybody, back then, that's white music. People don't understand. They're like, what are you listening to this for? This and that. Family members, random people are like, why are you listening to this music? Because I used to listen to it at work, and people are like, what is this crap you're listening to? Like, what is this? I'm like, it's what I like. So, it's cool. But yeah, there was very few black kids in the scene, back when I was coming up. And I remember going to shows, and I've been to shows where there have been lots of Nazis at shows too.
Yeah.
I remember we saw TSOL in Buffalo, and my brother had come up to visit me, and he was like, there was a lot of Nazis at the show, and he was scared because there were all these Nazis at the show. And I was just like, it's cool. All these guys, all these kids at the show, if anything shit goes down, they've got your back, because usually it's there was 4 or 5 Nazis at the show. There was,
right.
They didn't outnumber anyone. So
those fucking Nazi punks too is just
yeah. But I have been at shows where there's been lots of Nazis, but it seems never had an issue really though. I guess everyone's just there to kind of do their thing, but they give you the dirty looks and stuff and all that jazz. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot tougher then than it is now. It's cool when you go to a show today and you see all sorts of different kinds of people. I think most of the people go to shows here, the smaller shows in Buffalo, there's a lot of, people of color, lots of women at shows, and most of the people who are dancing at shows in Buffalo are women dancing, which is kind of cool. So it's a lot different than it was back then, and I'm glad to see the change, and it's very cool.
I mean, I think having a more inclusive scene is always better. But right, it was also tough for women. I mean, that whole like riot girl woman to the front thing came about for a reason, because it was like not safe, for women at shows, especially, in the early alternative and in the punk scene.
Yeah. And people were not nice.
Yeah, they were not nice. And that's a nice way of saying that they were assholes and, assaulting people.
Yeah, I've seen people get grabby, at shows and stuff, and it's just not, it's never been cool. And
it's just never been cool. And yeah, it's interesting, like talking to my kids about consent, because it's like all that thread. And, that's been always such an important conversation in our household, especially for the male people, but the women too, to like understand, what consent is and how to be. And, everyone thinks about that as really about sex, but really it's so much broader really than that.
In everyday life. Yeah.
It's in everyday life. Yeah.
You don't have the right to, you can't invade people's space, and you got to like let your kids know that, like, that they can't just like, if someone says they don't want you to deal with them, you can't you got to leave them alone. You have to respect people's wishes, which is very important.
And, it's funny, like that as a parent, like I had to learn, like every kid's different, right? Like you get in an argument and then like the oldest, he just would need to go and cool out. And my tendency is like, because my house growing up, like my brother would just get in these like really raging arguments with my parents. So I'm like carry my own shit from that, which I've worked on in therapy. But so my tendency is to just want to just fix the thing.
I'm with you.
But he's like, dude, I just fucking need to go cool out.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back out. And so like, that is sort of, it's a variant on consent in a way, but it is like, listening to what somebody's needs are and respecting them.
It's hard though. Like that's my tendency is to like want to like talk about something right then and there, fix it right then and there. And like, it's always going to be the tendency, but you have to kind of like see what the other person wants, and give them their, space and stuff. And it's hard though, because the way I am is the way I am. And like, that's my reaction, but you have to, you learn ways of dealing with things that you learn with dealing at the way you react to things. And that's kind of how you evolve in life,
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Like I've always like, I'm introverted and I've always been that way. And like, but I shoot weddings and stuff. I'm a photographer. I shoot weddings, and like, sometimes you got to like not be introverted, even if it's an you've got to kind of like,
I mean, I'm like that, introverted and pretty quiet. And I would much rather be with a very small group of people, but my job requires me to go to like hospital galas.
Yes.
And I always joke, do you remember, this is a terrible movie, it was this Sylvester Stallone movie, Over the Top. He was an arm wrestler. Do you remember that movie?
Over the Top.
And he had this thing where he would rotate his hat backwards.
Yes.
And so that's my joke about like, I'm going networking now. I got to swing that hat around and like kind of put on a little bit of this, not a persona, right? Because I think we all have different authentic selves, but it's a part of my life that I have to like stretch. Because I'm happy to stand in a corner with a seltzer and just observe what's going on, but that's not really the job at hand. It's to like see the clients and chat with the clients and all that stuff.
Yeah, sometimes I like I'm in a wedding and I have to go shoot, like ask people to take their pictures, and like I just do it, I turn it on, like, and it's fine. I always feel uncomfortable doing it, but it's what you got to do.
Right. It's the gig, and you got to be a little like energetic and outgoing.
Yes.
To like transfer that.
Yes.
Like the people who take like the best pictures of me or anyone, I think, is they get them really relaxed, or I don't know, it's common.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know
yeah.
the Sartorialist blog? Do you know him? He's a
No,
street
no.
photographer,
Hmm.
and he talked about, one of his tricks is because he'll just do people on the street and they're uncomfortable a lot, and a lot of times he'll take a bunch of pictures and he'll say, "I'm done." And he'll
Yeah.
move his camera down a little bit. And when he says, "I'm done," the person really relaxes and he takes a
Hmm.
shot. And he's like,
Okay.
it's usually the best shot because they're so
Nice.
fucking relieved
Yeah.
that like the photo torture is coming to an end.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool though. That's a good way to handle it. I try to make like a joke or something about something when I'm trying to get people to relax, or maybe I'll like shake it out and they're like, and that gets people to laugh a little bit, like, it's good. Most people, kind of are with that, because a lot of people at weddings, couples, don't like to have their picture taken even though they paid for a photographer. They're like, I think they do it for their parents or their family sometimes, but a
Yeah.
lot of people are very uncomfortable in front of a camera. But
My
you kind of
my
make it
wife
work.
was adamant, that she really wanted, lots and lots of photos. And I get it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's cool to kind of have that photographic memory from the thing.
Yeah. That's the only thing you take with you, the photos and the video. Like everything else, the food is
Yeah,
gone,
and the rings and the spouse.
True, 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 true,
But
true.
yeah, and in truth, you hardly get the food.
Yeah, you're too busy
Usually, like
socializing.
most of ours was gone by the time we circled
Yeah.
around to it. But we
Yeah.
had ours. We had a very small. I mean,
Mhm.
I guess 40 people or something is a pretty small wedding. But
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, um, another pivot back. So do you
Yeah.
think, like, I'm thinking about Buffalo and I'm thinking about Syracuse, is there something about these like Rust Belt kind of post-industrial cities that lends themselves to punk and hardcore? Because like Syracuse obviously has a huge, place in the straight edge
Yeah.
world with Earth Crisis and bands like that.
Definitely. Um, I I mean, I think this has something to do with it. Like Buffalo is kind of always been like, it's not New York, and its industry here died like, before, like in the 70s and stuff. And I feel like that definitely influences like the hardcore output in Buffalo. Like it's, the dead town, there's not much to do here, and it kind of like, lends itself to, trying to be creative and getting out of here, because, like a lot of bands have started here and gotten out of here and toured the world and stuff. So I guess it has something to do with it being a good scene. I mean, for my money, Buffalo has always been like my favorite hardcore scene. New York not excluded either. Like I just love Buffalo hardcore. Like I think it's the best. I
Yeah,
will
and
definitely ride for it.
I like a little bit of a downtrodden city. Like I lived in Chicago, like New York's
Yeah,
great, but
yeah,
I'd take Chicago over New York
yeah,
any
yeah,
day.
yeah,
It's much friendlier.
yeah, yeah,
Um, I think, and it has like a great art and music scene. And
uh,
I haven't spent a ton of time in Buffalo, but when I've been there, I really liked it.
yeah,
And I like Syracuse. I mean, I like a little dinge to the edge of my cities, I guess. Like too pristine's not good.
yeah. Syracuse is such an outlier though, because it's weird that that town has all these bands come from it. It's like, because Buffalo is Buffalo was a pretty big city. Syracuse is
Yeah,
just like there in the middle of the state, and like, why would anything come out of this town in the middle of the state? And
I know.
it did.
It's funny. And like, I mean, one of the guys that's tattooed me a lot is out of that
Uh,
scene, and that like a lot of them
uh,
own like coffee shops. They're very entrepreneurial.
yeah, yeah,
The punks tend to be a pretty entrepreneurial breed because that's what you have to do. But right, for a very small city,
yeah,
Syracuse did have a lot of bands
yeah,
come out of it.
definitely.
I mean, Buffalo's got the Goo Goo Dolls
Yeah, we
and
do.
Ani DeFranco.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I'm
We
not
got
going to
we got
hate
some
on
stuff.
Annie,
Yeah, yeah. She has a little she has this church in downtown Buffalo, which is cool.
Yeah, is that a cool? I've never been there. Is that a cool space?
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a nice space. Like, and they have like this big hall and little halls and inside of it. It's really cool. It's a really cool place for things to happen. So it's cool. Yeah, very cool.
Well, we're getting towards the end of our time, but just, to wrap up and circle back to parenting a little bit.
Yes.
I like to ask, is there not a trick, or I talked to one person, and is a good example. He said when he comes home, he puts his phone in his office and doesn't take it out till his kid's asleep. Like, do you have any kind of nugget like that?
No. As far as, the kids are pretty well, like, behaved, I would say, and they do pretty well. Like, I let them use, like, tablets and stuff, but, like, if I'm like, Claudia and Judy, gotta get off the tablet, there's never a protest. They're always like, okay, what are we doing? Like, stuff like that. Judy, you can't use your phone. Like, he's like, okay. He doesn't say why. He's like, okay. So it's cool. Like, it's cool that they're like that. I'm not sure where they got it though, because a lot of their peers aren't like that.
Yeah, the whole phone thing's tricky. I mean, you kind of, at a certain age, they kind of need one now. I mean, I guess you and I didn't have them. We had those things attached to the walls with cords. You had to pull it in your room to have a conversation, but times they do change.
Yeah, I got my daughter her phone. I got her a phone for her birthday last year, so that's her first phone, because like she would go stay at her friend's house and stuff, and there would have to be a way for me to like get a hold of her, and so that was important. So
right, or for her to get a hold of you. I mean, because I've always said to all the kids, it's like you have a no questions asked ride from any place. You and your friends. If there's something not good, you call, we come. We will fill the car with however many people need to get out of there.
Yeah.
And we will, no questions asked. We will leave. We will talk about it later. But like, you have a no questions asked escape from whatever situation you're in. And I just think that's important, for safety and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not looking forward to her dating and stuff. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how smoothly that goes.
Yeah. I've gone through a couple, my daughter's here with her boyfriend and he's cool. I like him. And, I'd rather have them like hang out at the house, and watching movies or whatever, and then out and away.
I hear you. Yeah, but I mean, like, the kids they're great. I mean, they're pretty well behaved. When they were little, neither one of them slept through the night for like the first year, so I guess maybe that has something to do with it. Them not sleeping.
Yeah, I mean that's like, I think, just standard. I always say to people, wait till they're at least 3 before you expect to have any semblance of a good run of sleep.
Yes. Yeah.
I just think now I'm old and I can't sleep late. That's my like thing now, because I get up at 6 most weekdays. And this morning I'm like, literally no one is in this house but me and the cat. And it's 10 to 7 and I wake up and I'm like, Jesus, like, I
wake up before 6 every day. So
yeah. Like I don't have anything imminent I need to do this morning. Just like make some coffee and like relax. I always like the notion of one weekend day being able to like bring a cup of coffee back into bed.
That'd be cool.
It doesn't always happen, but it's a dream.
Yeah. You got a dream.
Yep.
Very cool.
All right. Well, this was super fun. I super appreciate it.
Yeah. It was very cool. Hopefully, since you've been on this podcast, maybe we can have you on our podcast at some point.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah,
I've done that. Talk about your thing.
Yeah, I've done that a couple of times, and it's kind of fun to like turn the tables. And you do like a group thing, which is cool.
Yeah.
I've never done like a co-host thing.
Yeah, we have people come on. Well, we have the two normal co-hosts, but like sometimes we'll have like a group of people on and stuff like that. So, yeah, very cool. This was awesome. This was fun.
Thanks for listening. Sober Dad Crew is a DIY project by Stephen Kimball, who writes, edits, and produces the show. To support the show, please review it where you listen to podcasts or visit SoberDadCrew.com to buy some merchandise or make a donation.